Learning Lab is Michael. Michael, take us away on this very confusing topic for some.
It's confusing even for me. I'll tell you what, I've been continuing to look at it. My name's Michael Blake. I'm the CEO of Blake Tech, which is a high-end consulting firm. We also do project work, and we take on tough problems. I'm in Boston, and right now I'm down in Charlottesville, Virginia, visiting family. And so I got started in this, and this is, Paul, you picked a good one.
You said, Michael, you said you wanted hard problems.
That's right. And we usually do hard problems and get them fixed. This is not one for me to fix. I'm not an attorney. I'm just a practitioner. We've had to use a lot of scrambling around to have just to read everybody else's legal stuff before we use it. So, and I'm an advisor for some other startups, which we've had to do. And we've got several of the LLMs that I'm talking about today. They're built into some of our products, and we're having to go back through on a couple of them because I picked up some new items. So the concept of a large language model, everybody
Michael, do you have slides you're presenting, or just this is verbal?
This is just verbal.
Okay.
I made a bunch of notes and just worked off of it. Mainly because I kept having to go back and change all my notes. But you know, the LLM is exactly what we've gotten to be able to get to the point we're at for the future of AI. And we've got licenses and to be able to govern the use and distribution of these LLMs. You know, it still comes down to good old-fashioned software and software licenses, except that this is not, it is and it isn't good old-fashioned software. So we've had people get in trouble, and they've had themselves fired and things back. This is just in the LLM, companies making the LLMs. So what we have is open source licenses. Can you hear me okay?
We can, Michael.
Okay.
And I'm going to just share a notes. People want to collectively take notes as Michael goes through this. I'll send a link out right now.
That's a good idea. We've got open source software. So people take open source software, which they usually consider it the free software that you go looking for if you want to try doing something. And those open source licenses usually let you take the source code with you and work on it. You can, you know, it's the stuff we've been used to doing. It's Apache 2.0, MIT license. And they're applying them to open source LLM licenses and saying that those should be the same way. Well, most of these open source licenses don't allow you to do things such as see the code, the context that's come in with what was used to train this, and then which is a lot of data usually. And what are the weights? How do you handle all of that? There are some advantages to this. People think of the open source as being something that's very, very inexpensive. So then we've got quite a few proprietary licenses, which those they cook themselves for one reason or another. They've come up with a license model for their software for one time or for multiple times. And you don't want to run astray on those because that's a good question too, JD. Are the models considered code or data? Now, I've always considered them code with some data built into it. And the trade-offs between an open source license, we have people that are out there selling their LLM system or allowing people to use their LLM system and calling it open source when the only thing that you can do is just actually use it. Well, that's different to me. And then you've got custom licenses and research licenses. Research, of course, are academic licenses. And custom licenses are usually when it's more of a proprietary license. But when you get into trouble with anything like this, and you've got people's data in it, or you've got their means of using it, those are all built into
Michael,
it.
there's a question from John. Are you taking questions now, or you want to wait till the end?
I'll take them if I see them. Jason put that one in there. What's John's question?
He's got his hand up. John, do you have a question?
Yes, Michael. Yeah. So, Michael, is the right way to think of this basically from, completely open licenses, like the Creative Commons license, where you can basically use it any way you want, all the way up through proprietary closed models. And as you see that go up, are you saying that you think it's riskier as you move up, or you're finding that it's very different depending upon how you apply it?
It's different. It depends on how you apply it. What I've found is the ones with what would truly be an open license, like an Apache 2 style license, which seems to be the majority of the free licensing that's going on right now. Those are, here's our software, and just go ahead and use it. And if you use it for something else, then apply this license to it. But we're not talking about somebody that you're making you're taking source code and then modifying it, and then like on a pull request, and then posting it back into a GitHub repository.
And Michael, as I understand it, with the most recent, and tell me if this is correct, the most recent Meta open source models, they have the 405 billion parameter. They get the 70 billion out of the 7, as I remember. And they are allowing you a runtime. Is that correct? They're not sharing source code, and they are not sharing training data, and they're not sharing the weights. Is that correct?
That's correct. To me, that's not open of any nature. That's just, this is our stuff, and we're using that as a marketing term.
So is it fair to say that none of the frontier models, as defined as hundreds of billions of parameters, are yet to be truly open? Is that correct?
No, that's correct. From the research I've gone through, majority of them are proprietary, and they're keeping keeping everything that they're doing private. Some of them are having to actually put in some new licensing terms, and we recently saw a few of them coming up from the EU, from their new AI law and some of their GDPR stuff.
So as we think about this and compare it to something like, the internet open source, backbone with, the Apache servers and so forth, this really has different new categories, right? We have the runtime model, we have the source code for the runtime model, we have the data, and we have the weights.
That's correct.
That fair kind of four-part way to think about them?
That is the way to think about them. I think that they're worried about people seeing the weights and either picking at it or using that to make their own LLM, figure out how people have done it. And I'm sure that they try everything. I've seen it on stuff we've done.
Michael, one last question for you. We have heard we're doing some work with one of the frontier model companies, and we've been told, but we don't we're still skeptical, but we have been told that if you look at the frontier models, that is the hundreds of billions, so hard to get used to, hundreds of billions of parameters in these models, they are, let's say, 300 billion and above, that
Mhm.
it turns out that there's 50 lines of software that actually get those models to converge, and no one has been able to make that work yet. And if you look at the big models, they are all related to, in terms of the intellectual and the talent tree, back to the Google DeepMind crew that started in
Mhm.
2017 after Google bought them and so forth and did the transformer model. And that, so if you look at Mistral, if you look at Cohere, if you look at Anthropic, if you look at Inflection, if you look at OpenAI, if you look at Gemini, all of those folks have people from that group, including Suleiman, who went back over to Microsoft. But then you look at
Yes.
someone like Falcon out of the UAE, they have not got their mega models to converge yet because they
Mhm.
don't have someone from that lineage. Do you find that a credible explanation from what you've seen?
Yes, and I've got a small list here, and they all say proprietary on everything that you've said. The only one that actually comes up with Apache would be Alpaca, which is a Stanford creation, and they did it in the lab.
I see. Fascinating.
It is, and they say it's an Apache license, but they won't show you any of the code and what they took things from. The ones that are very good about being able to say, okay, here's what we've trained on, and here's the whole pile, as they referred to it, and this is the data that we built into it. I think the smaller models are getting to be better as far as I'm concerned for use. We've seen some really good results in being able to write code using some of the smaller models.
That's interesting, Michael, because what we've seen in the research papers is that even for specific tasks, the large frontier models seem to
Mm-hmm.
be able to outperform the focus models. But you're seeing a trend now, at least in code writing, where we're going to what I would think the more intuitive way, which would be a small model targeted at an activity would outperform a mega model that's very broad. And you're starting to see
Yes,
we haven't seen that broadly, but you're saying that's what you're starting to see happen. Is that correct?
that's what we're starting to see happen. And Pieces for Developers is one of my investments that I'm an advisor for them. But we offer a wide range of models. The smaller models where you can download one onto a laptop or into a computer that you can use writing software, you can be air gapped. And we get good results from that, being able to write code. But we've taken the model and fine-tuned it just for one task, which is working with code.
So Michael, can you review for the non-technical people in the audience, why even use open source? What are the advantages of open source versus ChatGPT closed source method?
You know something? I started into the research on this, and I am not finding anything that tells me there's an advantage to using open source. But they're trying to take care of some responsible and ethical questions that people had. But a lot of the proprietary stuff like Mistral and the inferential, things like that, our guys over at Stability, they've gotten in trouble on some things.
Yeah.
Taking the data and using somebody else's data and putting it into their product.
Michael,
So
there's a couple questions here. Let's go to Ray and then we'll go to Michael. Go ahead, Ray. Ray Upton, are you on mute?
Sorry, sorry. Thanks, Paul.
You have the killer visual though, Ray. I mean,
Thank you.
you kind
Thank
of
you.
turned into I can't decide if it's a Jackson Pollock or, whatever.
I'm an abstract artist, and that's one of my pieces.
Beautiful.
And right now my camera's behind my computer without the details, so I don't have it out. Normally I would have the camera out.
Very good.
It's important first to be really, really clear on what true open source is, and then what proprietary is. True open source is any application, program, app that is available for anyone in the world to contribute to. Anyone can download all the code or program it online, whatever it is. So anyone can contribute, anyone can access the code, anyone can program and do anything they want with it. Proprietary is when they do not release the code for other people. So apparently what you're describing, Michael, is that there are certain ones that have some of it open and some of it or a lot of it is closed. And when
Exactly.
Paul, right? And so Paul, when you just asked the question, I'm a true open source guy, and I have used a lot of truly open source programs out there. And the benefit and advantage to it, if it ever shows up in this space, is that because so many people are contributing to the development and evolution of the program, you will wind up with a myriad of features and capabilities beyond proprietary software. So AI right now, OpenAI with its ChatGPT, it has certain limitations, as we know, the guardrails, right? So you got those guardrails, which are really high, and they're getting higher, right? So if you have a true open source for your own purposes, you don't have any guardrails if you want them, but you are programming for your own benefit, for your own in-house reasons. You're working for a company, they want to have something that's proprietary to them, but you can create that using anything you want. And that to me is the major, major difference.
And Ray, let me just put a square on it. So like we've seen that in Apache and Linux, where you've had open source become widespread industry standards. The argument that many make currently in the AI world is that these quote open source models are catching up to the closed and will surpass them. It sounds like you and Michael are making the case that's not the case, because it's not at least truly open source in a traditional sense.
Correct.
It's not in a traditional sense, but then also it looks like they're using their license to cover their ass. Excuse my French there.
Well, it sounds, Michael, it sounds like the license issue to cover themselves, their hind ends, is that this technology, as we know, can be used for all kinds of nefarious purposes. And some of those, most of us can't even imagine. But there's so many problems associated with this technology when it comes to the nefarious reasons, purposes, and things you can do with it. And so to cover themselves, because they don't want to have the target put on them that somebody did something bad to somebody somewhere, and they did it using that software. And now they're coming after them. And
yeah,
so
or just in terms of marketing, just selling the software or having somebody use that service, you don't want a bad name.
well, again, if they're using the terminology open source, true open source software, nobody ever goes after them because it's contributed by thousands of people worldwide, are creating all kinds of features and capabilities. There's no one to go after if it's truly open source. So the issue is it really open? It'd be nice to know, Michael, have you found any of them that are truly open? I don't
None
think
that
there are. Yeah,
I
not
haven't
yet.
seen anybody that will allow me to download their, you know, their source data and the programming that they use to do that. I haven't seen that yet.
I think everybody wants to keep this, rightfully so, proprietary, because everybody wants the first chance at the finish line of the next incredible revolution of however this stuff is being used. And so we
Yes.
could, right? And so because of that, it's like, yeah, well, we'll tell you some of it's open, but no, we're keeping this ourselves because we're going to create that unbelievable thing that's going to make us billionaires. And so they want to hold off on that. And I think that's kind of the gist of it. I'll leave it there. There's other hands up.
Well, appreciate,
Well,
thank you, Ray. We got a few folks hands up. We'll go to Michael, then Jay. Go
yeah,
ahead,
go
Michael.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to jump in, and I think it was a question about potential value from open source. And I think one of those is the ownership of the model or being held captive by some of these other players. And so if you can download one of the models like on Meta, you're not held captive to changes in versions pricing from a third party. And so you can continue to use that older model if you so choose. And I think that is valuable to some players who don't like the forced upgrade process that they've experienced through other vendors. So that was the one comment I was going to add.
Well, yes. And then Meta's license stands out to me because it's got they're covering themselves. Basically, they're shoving all of the telling you you're required to indemnify and hold Meta harmless against claims that come up from your use of their material and significant financial and legal risks, etc. And if your product or service reaches 700 million monthly active users, well, that's basically you're not going to come up with that many monthly with anything unless you're reselling the use of one of their models on some computers out of your basement or whatever.
Or Google. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah. So for everybody, has anyone seen any slice of all of these companies and the ones that are in France, which my understanding is, and I'm not a geopolitical savant by any stretch, but my understanding is that in France, your ability to claim intellectual property is quite streamlined, and that is supported by the French government. As compared to other countries where one might have to, say, fill out paperwork or do filings. My understanding is that just by virtue of being a French company, you are immediately, your IP is protected. So has anyone seen or looked at any kind of slicing to determine what amount of funding and number of companies are forming or operating in France as it relates to AI and intellectual property?
Well, Mistral's there, and Hugging Face is incorporated here in the U.S., but they operate out of Paris. So, well, they operate out of everywhere. Mistral has two models. One of them's the Nemo model. That's an Apache 2.0 license for a 12 billion parameter LLM, and they have an NVIDIA partnership, which when they were first doing this, they did that, but then they came out with their large 2 model, and they have a proprietary license that's part of a commercial license for them. So, and
That's
Mistral
great.
runs.
So at one, at simplistic level, Michael and others, is it the benefit? It's really just kind of an API that's free, right? I'm downloading this token machine that I can ask questions through, and I can avoid the API fees that I have from OpenAI. And I can, as Michael said, I can control when the upgrades are. But everything else is black box. Is that a overly simplistic characterization?
Overly simplistic. Sometimes you have to pay a fee for using it, especially if you're putting it into commercial use. Looking at Meta, you actually have to go to them and with a use case and get their blessing on what you're doing.